For the first time since 1982, Formula One will be racing in Las Vegas. It's random numbers and facts like that you'll see throughout this video. So get ready for some random numbers, get ready for some odds, get ready for all of it, because we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Grand Prix. We're going to talk about the race weekend, talk about the track, preview. We're going to talk about the weather. We're going to talk about it all. So get ready for it this weekend. So yeah, I'll be doing videos. I guess I got an announcement here. I'm going to be actually at the race weekend here in Vegas. That's why I'm not in my normal studio, if you can't tell. These are curtains that are not mine. So yeah, first we're going to do our preview, and then tonight will be the first practice. I'll video the first few laps, post that. Qualifying on Friday, race on Saturday, obviously. So I'm looking forward to bringing you all that. But we got a lot to talk about here, so let's talk about it. So first, let's talk about this new track. So back when I said at the beginning of this video, last time Vegas or F1 was in Vegas was 1982. In 1981 and 1982, there was a thing called the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. That was in the parking lot of Caesars Palace, one of the hotel casinos here in Vegas. Well, the new track is a bit bigger. Here's the graphic of it. Yeah, as you can tell, quite the difference. Now let's talk about the actual track itself. The track that we're going to be running on this weekend, not the Caesars Palace Grand Prix track. That track is now covered with hotels, pools, and I don't know, other things, streets, parking lot, sidewalks. But yeah, let's talk about the track. I feel like Crofty here. I'm about to just rattle off a bunch of track details. 3.8 miles or 6.12 kilometers, 17 turns on this track. It goes down multiple streets. We're going to talk about them all. Turns 1 through 3 are in the paddock area, which was an old block that wasn't used for anything. Well, now it is a Formula One paddock building and pit lane and all that. Turn 4 goes on to Koval Lane, and that is when we see our first of 2 DRS zones. We're going to see a long straight down there, and then we are going to go into Turn 5, which is on Westchester Drive, and it curves around the giant, magnificent sphere. I'm sure you all have seen pictures of it at this point. People on the social media have been talking about it nonstop in terms of the F1 people that I follow, because they think it's so magnificent, and they're right. The sphere is magnificent. So we have a chicane from turn 6 to 8 around the sphere. You kind of curve around it, and then there's a chicane in there, and then you go on to turn 9, and turn 9 turns on to Sands Avenue, and then on Sands Avenue we're going to see turns 10, 11, and then turn 12 is when we go on to Las Vegas Boulevard, also known as the Strip, and then turn 13 it's technically called a turn, and yes, there is a curve there, but it's really a straight. They're going to be flooring it through there. It's still a straight, but it is turn 13 right in front of the Mirage, and then we will have our second DRS zone right after that curve for the final bit of that straight. It's a very long straight. I believe it's like 1.18 miles. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's where the second DRS zone will hit. And then we go into turns 14, 15, and 16. That's kind of like a little bit of a chicane area turning onto Harmon. And then we go down another straight on Harmon, but no DRS on this straight. Then we go on to turn 17, which is a curve, a left-handed curve back to the start-finish line. So that is your track details. That is your track tour, I guess. I did a few actual tours of the track, well, not official tours. I made my own tours, what I did. Walked on the outside of the track, walked the streets, all that stuff. It's going to be very interesting. The weather is going to be cold. In Fahrenheit, it's going to be like the high 40s, low 50s. Not sure what that translates out to Celsius, but it's going to be very cold, which means the tires are going to take a while to get up to temperature. The cars are going to take a while to get up to temperature. So it's going to make for some potential chaos. And then there's the whole topic on top of that it's a brand new racetrack. No one has ever run on it. They have zero data on it. Yeah, they have simulators and stuff, but they've never run on it. It's a brand new surface. Who knows what's going to happen? This could be the most chaotic race ever. This could be actually the most predictable race ever. I don't know. But I have 2 examples I'll give you later of what I think this race could be. That's a very good, standard of the maximum chaos and the maximum non-chaos. We'll talk about that later. But The fact that there is no other series at the track this weekend, there's no F2, no F3, no other supporting series. I was listening to an interview of one of the team mechanics or something, or one of the team engineers, that they actually use, some of these F2, F3 guys as, they get data from them to help them in the main event, the F1 Grand Prix. They don't have that this weekend. So with a brand new track, with challenging weather conditions, there's even a chance of rain on Friday night. And, obviously if it's raining and cold, that's going to make for a very tricky qualifying session. We could see a lot of shuffling up in the leaderboard. We could see a very chaotic starting grid on Saturday. We could be in for an absolutely chaotic race. But yeah, so top speeds are estimated to be anywhere between 212 and 220 miles per hour, which is about 342 kilometers an hour is what I have written down here. As we flip to the next page, having fun already. But if you're looking for the sessions, I'm going to give you the local time. So here in the Pacific time is where the local time zone is for Las Vegas. FP1 is going to be from 8:30 to 9:30. FP2 is going to be midnight to 1 a.m. Of course, that is midnight of Saturday or Friday at that point, midnight to 1 a.m. And then Friday, the first session, just like on Thursday, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And then qualifying will be midnight to 1 a.m. on technically Saturday. And then, of course, the Grand Prix, the race, local time is at 10 p.m. Now, let's go over your race winners this year. There's only 3 of them. There have been 20 races this year, and we only have 3 winners. Max Verstappen, obviously, if you keep up with F1. Honestly, even if you don't keep up with F1, you probably know about Max Verstappen and what he's done to the field this year. He has 17 wins in 20 races. I can't name them all. That would take too long. I'm going to name where he didn't win, though, because that is significant for this. The other winners are Sergio Perez. He won twice early in the year at Saudi Arabia and Azerbaijan. And then Carlos Sainz won a race at Singapore. And that is where the interesting note is. Max Verstappen has won 17 races this year. He's won at all different types of racetracks. He's won at some street circuits like Monaco. He's won at, permanent facilities like COTA and everything in between. But it is an interesting note that all 3 of the races that he has lost have been on street circuits. Now, different circumstances, obviously. Like Saudi Arabia, he was out in Q2 and he had to start 15th, and he couldn't catch up to his teammate Perez. Azerbaijan, I think Perez just straight up beat him that weekend, which was a rare one-off. And then Singapore, him and Red Bull as a whole had a bad weekend. Both were eliminated in Q2, and, they both made the points by I think Verstappen was 6th and Perez was 8th or something. So very different circumstances, but it still is an interesting note that Verstappen, his 3 losses this year are on street courses. Now we go to the odds, and this is where I have most of my writing. We've got some different categories here. I'm not going to go through every single category because there's 20 of them, at least according to Caesars Sportsbook. That's where I got these odds from. And obviously these odds are subject to change. Once the practice sessions are over, they'll shuffle around, and if more bets are leaning one way, they're going to shift that way. So we're just going to look at them. I'm going to give you my opinion on some of these at the end, but we're going to look at win, podium, top 6, and points finish, and then I'll give you some other odd picks. There's to not finish the race, both teams to score points, or both cars to score points for a team. There's a lot of odd bets. We're not going to cover them all, but I'm going to still share some of them. But I am going to share every single driver for win, podium, top 6 points. So let's look at the win first. Max Verstappen is a heavy favorite at minus 225, meaning if you bet $22.50, you win $10. Then it's a drop-off. Well, as I said, Verstappen a heavy favorite. Lando Norris is plus 750, meaning if you bet $10, you win 75. And then we go to Charles Leclerc. He's 12 to 1. Lewis Hamilton is 14 to 1. Carlos Sainz 16 to 1. Sergio Perez 22 to 1. Oscar Piastri 33 to 1. George Russell 33 to 1. Fernando Alonso is 40 to 1. Esteban Ocon 250 to 1. That is the biggest drop off right there. Then we see Alex Albon 250 to 1, Pierre Gasly 250 to 1, Lance Stroll 300 to 1, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo are both 400 to 1, Nico Hulkenberg is 500 to 1, And then we see Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, and Valtteri Bottas all 750 to 1 to win the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Then we go to podium. Once again, Max Verstappen heavily in the minus there. Minus 500, meaning if you bet $50, you would win 10. Lando Norris is minus 162. Charles Leclerc plus 150. Lewis Hamilton plus 175. Sainz is plus 175. Perez plus 180. Then we see a little bit of a drop there. And actually some of these, I put these in order, the drivers in order of their race win odds. So some of it's not completely in order after this for podium, top 6, and points. But as I said, Perez 180, Piastri plus 600, so 6 to 1. George Russell 5.5 to 1. Fernando Alonso 9 to 1. Ocon 80 to 1. Albon 66 to 1. Gasly 80 to 1. Sargent 100 to 1. Correction, that's Lance Stroll 100 to 1. Yuki Tsunoda 110 to 1. Ricardo 110 to 1. Hulkenberg 175 to 1. Sargent 200 to 1. Magnussen 175 to 1. Zhou Guanyu 250 to 1, and once again, Valtteri Bottas 175 to 1. Then we go to the top 6, Max Verstappen minus 800, Norris minus 500, and then we see a bunch of minus 333s. That's going to be Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Perez. Then we see Piastri, the first one in the plus at plus 120, but then we go back to the minus for George Russell, minus 125. Alonso plus 125, Ocon plus 1600, Albon plus 800, Gasly 16 to 1, Stroll 16 to 1, Tsunoda 25 to 1, Ricardo 25 to 1, Hulkenberg 28 to 1, Sargent 40 to 1, Magnussen 28 to 1, Zhou Guanyu 40 to 1, and then Bottas 28 to 1. Then we go to the points finish, and this is where it gets more interesting for the bat markers in midfield. Minus 900 for Max Verstappen to score points. So at this point, I'll give that advice later. Norris minus 700, Leclerc minus 600, Hamilton minus 700, Sainz minus 600, Perez minus 600, Piastri minus 350, Russell minus 450, Alonso minus 333, Ocon plus 150, Albon minus 150. That's an interesting one right there. That has shifted a lot since last week. Gasly plus 150. Stroll is even at plus 100. Tsunoda plus 225. Ricardo plus 225. Hulkenberg plus 400. Sargent plus 650. Magnussen 5 to 1 or plus 500. Zhou Guanyu plus 550. And then Valtteri Bottas plus 350. So obviously there's a lot to process there. You can go back, pause, look at it. Max Verstappen's a heavy favorite in every single one of these categories. The biggest thing for him, if you're going to take top 6 minus 800, might as well just take the points at minus 900 just in case he has a really bad race and finishes 7th, and then that way you're not out a big amount of money, because I'm assuming with that heavy of a favorite, you'd put a bigger wager on it. Some of these you can parlay, some of them you can't. I can't really figure out why they decide why you can parlay some things and why you can't. And that's the first thing I'm going to bring up here. I'm not telling you to do this for sure, because once again, you're allowed to do what you want. I'm not telling you what to do with your money, but it's just something I find interesting. And, gambling happens and people gamble, but, this is just an interesting thing I find. I don't know how else to say it. I'm not telling you to do it. This is just, I don't know, whatever. You get the point. Max Verstappen minus 225. You can parlay it with something. You can parlay it with something outside of F1. You can't really parlay it with anything in F1. Let me tell you about Iowa football. The Iowa Hawkeyes. If you are from out of the U.S. and you don't know much about American football, the Iowa Hawkeyes do not score points. They have played 10 games this year, and I think only one of those games have they hit the pre-game over. So there's an over-under on points, like how many points are going to be scored by both teams combined in the game. Iowa's only hit the over once. The over-under this weekend is against Illinois. I think it's like 30.5, 31.5. Iowa does not score points, but they also don't allow teams to score points. Throw in a parlay of Max Verstappen minus 225 and Iowa hitting the under, and I think that gets you slightly in the plus to like plus 150. If you don't like taking minus odds, if you don't like taking minus 225 and you want to get it in the plus, you want to get a better value out of it, because the fact of the matter is this is racing. While Max Verstappen is a heavy favorite and he'll probably win if we're being honest, turn one he can get taken out and there goes your bet, He can have a mechanical failure while 2 laps ahead of the field and he loses the race. Like, things happen in racing that don't happen in other sports. If Michigan's up 50 points on Maryland with 5 minutes left in the game, they can't blow an engine and lose. Like, they just got to run out the clock. That's not how it is in racing, so it's very different. If you don't like those odds, maybe throw it in a parlay. If you're a soccer fan, go throw it in with a Premier League game. I don't know. But Max Verstappen, Iowa Hawkeye football, mash them together, you get them in the plus. Now, as for points finishers, this is the one that I find most intriguing because podium, you got about, I would say, 6 to 8 guys who are realistically going to finish on the podium. Both Red Bulls are going to be in contention. Yeah, Perez has struggled a little bit recently. It's been a while since he's been on a podium. I think Monza was the last time he was on the podium in September. But he's going to be in contention for a podium. Sergio Perez, 5 of his 6 career wins have come on street circuits. This track is more than likely going to suit Red Bull. I would expect Perez, as long as he doesn't wreck it, as long as he doesn't have a mechanical failure or a terrible qualifying session, he should be in contention for a podium. I think the same goes for both Ferraris. Ferraris looked really good on these big high-speed tracks like Monza, like Azerbaijan. I think both of them are going to be in contention. Mercedes had an awful race last week, but realistically, I think Lewis Hamilton's going to be in contention. Russell has been a little bit of an oddball this year. He only has 1 podium on the season, whereas last year, him and Hamilton were exchanging podiums. This year, though, Russell has kind of struggled compared to Hamilton. Hamilton has quite a few podiums, whereas Russell only has the 1. Fernando Alonso is a tricky one because he got back on the podium last week at Brazil, yes. But, and I do say but, Aston Martin has struggled the second half of the season. That was Alonso's first podium since the Netherlands back in August. So personally, I would avoid Alonso podium. I would avoid Aston Martin as a whole because I don't know what they're going to do this weekend. They may show up like Brazil last week. They may suck again. I don't know. But them and Mercedes having weird weeks last week really threw me off, and that's why I'm not 100% confident in either one of them. And then as for McLaren, Lando Norris, if they can continue that speed, the first half of the season, they were like 9th in the Constructors, maybe 7th or 8th at best. They were awful. They've been rattling off podiums like it's nothing the second half of the season. Norris has a ton of podiums. He's finished second a few times. He's gotten a couple poles, I think. Oscar Piastri, a rookie, has finished on the podium twice. So McLaren's going to be in contention for the podium. So I just named 8 guys I think who have a shot at the podium. So there you go. There's my opinion on that. As for a long shot for the podium, Williams is really good at tracks with long straights with big power. This is a track with that, lots of straightaways, a big chance for Williams here to score some points in their battle for 7th in the Constructors. If you want an absolute long shot, just, put a couple bucks on it because why not? Maybe Albon podium. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know if this race gets chaotic. You never know. As for top 6, though, I think Albon, what is he? Let's check the note sheet here. He's 8-1 to get a top 6. I don't think that's a terrible option there. Just because, as I said, they've been really good at these tracks with long straights. And look at Monza, another track with a lot of straights. Albon finished 7th in that race. He held on to 6th for a majority of that race before. I think it was Hamilton and Norris passed him late. I think he held off one of them. He held off Hamilton, I want to say. But he was really close to the top 6 there. They got a good chance at it today, or Sunday, or Saturday, whatever day this race is. So Albon 8-1, that's a value pick, I guess. But once again, it's you win it all or you lose it all. There's no real in between. And then as for points finishes, everyone's just been competitive at some point of the year in terms of fighting for points. I think Alfa Romeo and Haas have really struggled as of lately. So if you're going to take them, it's a more risky pick, which is what the odds show. Them and Logan Sargent are the lowest in the points. And that's why I'm going to say Logan Sargent in the points. And I think it's plus 650, so 6.5 to 1. That is not a terrible value because Logan Sargent, he scored points the last time out in the US of A. Yeah, it's a different track over at COTA. But Logan Sargent, both Williams cars scored at Austin at the US Grand Prix. And as I just said, Williams expected to do really good at this track. Sargent could get himself his second career points finish. That is not a terrible value. And then another note I wanted to add is that AlphaTauri is on a hot streak right now. They have 3 straight races in which they have scored points. In fact, I think 13 of their 20-something points that they've scored this year have been in the last 3 races. Yuki Tsunoda scored, I think, 5 last week. Daniel Ricciardo scored a few the week before. And then Tsunoda scored 5 at Austin. I might have a couple of those numbers flipped, but they have scored 13 points in the last 3 races. So they're on a 3-race streak of scoring points. So either one of those drivers, I think you could take and have a decent shot at that happening. Now, before the race, we got to qualify for the race, obviously. And Max Verstappen's the favorite. He's minus 125 to win the pole. No surprise here. As I said, it's a Red Bull track. Red Bull's expected to perform well here. Max Verstappen, already the world champion. He's won so many poles this year, so many races. But Charles Leclerc sitting there second. I think he's plus 350 now. I had written down plus 400. I think that's changed since I wrote this down. That is not a bad pick. Leclerc has 4 poles on the year, despite Red Bull being extremely dominant, and Leclerc is extremely good in a single lap. In qualifying, he gets it done. Leclerc, he finished well off Max Verstappen in the driver's standings last year. He finished second in the driver's standings, but Verstappen clinched it with like 5 or 6 races to go. Leclerc had the most poles last year, I think. He has 22 in his career, despite having 0 world championships and only having 5 or 6 career wins. Maybe it's 7. His pole to win ratio is heavily leaning towards the poles. So if you're going to take someone other than Verstappen in the pole, Leclerc would be the guy to do it. And he's in the plus. So that's a plus. So if anyone's going to take away a Max Verstappen pole, my top pick would be Leclerc. Now, something else interesting is they have a safety car bet. So will there be a safety car or not in this race? Safety car, yes, is heavily favored at minus 450. No is plus 333. And yeah, I personally would expect it, but once again, it's racing. We don't know what could happen. I'm about to give you the 2 extremes I mentioned earlier. There are 2 extremes that can happen in this race. The inaugural Azerbaijan Grand Prix, it was the European Grand Prix back then in 2016. New track, no one knew what to expect. Everyone thought it was going to be chaos, street circuit. Nothing happened. No safety cars. Nico Rosberg wins by 20 miles. But then we have the other extreme. 2021, just like this year actually, brand new street circuit, penultimate race of the year. But in this case, there's not a championship fight. So that's the big difference here. Saudi Arabia, 2021. A lot of you remember this race. 2 red flags, another safety car, and a few virtual safety cars. That race was extremely chaotic. So those are your 2 extremes. A couple red flags, an extra safety car, tons of virtual safety cars. Then you got yourself carefree race, nothing happens. Those are your 2 extremes. What's going to happen? But I don't think we're going to go as extreme as that Saudi Arabia race back in 2021. But because it's a new tarmac, because it's a new track, because it's a new surface, all that stuff, and because it's going to be cold, which is going to mean the tires are going to take a while to get back up to temperature, I think there will be a safety car at some point in this race, whether it's a lap 1, turn 1 incident, whether it's an engine expiring. RPMs, revs are going to get way up at the end of the boulevard because it's such a long straight. Shenanigans, I think, are going to happen in this race. So I think there will be at least 1 safety car. And I think you can parlay that with something. So you can parlay that with the Iowa football, as I said earlier. But I like yes. In fact, the last 2 first events we've had, there have been a safety car, 2022 Miami, 2021 Saudi Arabia. Although the 2 before that, 2021 Qatar and 2021 Dutch Grand Prix, they did not have safety cars, even though Dutch Zandvoort had seen a F1 race before, but it was back in the 80s. Now, there's also odds on DNFs. That's playing roulette, essentially. You cannot predict who's going to DNF a race. You can guess. You can get some numbers and stats and info like I just did here, and I'm going to tell you some of them. But realistically, you can't predict DNFs. You don't know if someone's going to crash. You can try your best to guess. But here's what I found interesting. Most DNFs in 2023 for Formula One, Esteban Ocon, he has 7 DNFs. He's probably the guy I take just because of his trends this year. It's been a couple races since he's DNF'd. It was back in Austin, so 3 races ago. Next up, I think Logan Sargent has 4. Alex Albon has 4. Charles Leclerc has 3, but he also has a did not start at Brazil, so I don't know if that counts as a DNF. And then George Russell has 4. I'm not going to give you any advice there. If you're going to take that risk, have fun with that. All the odds are between plus 300 and plus 550, so there's no like heavy favorite to crash, and there's also no long shot to crash. Anyone could crash. Anyone could have an engine expiration. Now I'm going to give you guys some of the what I like, I guess, for their value. So basically the value of the pick, you know, as I said earlier, if you don't like the value of Max Verstappen minus 225, then you're going to probably try to parlay it with something else you're confident in, because you want to get a better value out of that money. You don't want to risk a bunch of money on Max Verstappen winning, and then his engine explodes when he has a 30-second lead, and you're out a certain amount of money. So I'm going to give you a bunch of pluses here, essentially. Both Williams to score. I like this. And AlphaTauri, both AlphaTauris to score. Both of these will not happen. You can take one or the other if you ask me. I don't think both of them will happen, but they both have a pretty solid odds. Both Williams to score is plus 1,100, so 11-1. As I said, this track with the big straights is expected to favor Williams in terms of the fight for the points positions. You never know. Albon could run well. Sargent, if he can pick it up like he did at Coda again, he could finish well. He finished 11th last week at Brazil. Sargent's been running much better recently, so maybe both of them could sneak into the points. If they both score in the points, it's not going to be a sure thing. It's not going to be like a 4th and 5th. It would be most likely, if I had to be realistic, Albon at best 7th, Sargent at best 9th. So realistically, they're going to be 8th to 10th. So you're going to be biting your nails down to the last lap. As for AlphaTauri, that one is 8-1 odds. As I said, AlphaTauri is on a hot streak right now. They've scored in 3 straight races. They've scored the majority of their points this season in the last 3 races. 3 different tracks. They've run well at every single one. They've found something. If they can continue that, momentum, continue that hot streak, they very well could get that 8-1. But it requires both of them scoring. That's why I'm a little on the edge, because it's only been one guy scoring for the last few weeks. And then as for both team drivers to finish on the podium, Red Bull, I know Sergio Perez hasn't gotten a podium since Italy, as I said, but as long as he doesn't wreck himself, as long as he doesn't have a mechanical failure, and as long as he puts together a decent qualifying, if this track is as good to Red Bull as we expect, him and Verstappen should be the absolute favorites to finish on the podium. Verstappen will be a heavy favorite. Perez will be one of the favorites, but I think Perez can absolutely finish on the podium in this race. And in fact, if he finishes on the podium, he locks up second place in the driver's standings, unless Lewis Hamilton wins and he finishes 3rd. So big motivation for Perez. Red Bull has never gotten a 1-2 in the driver's standings in their history. Perez can lock that up this weekend, and I think a podium would be a cherry on top for him. He's had a rough season, and that would help him a lot. So plus 230 for those if you like that. As I said earlier, fastest qualifier, Leclerc. That's all I got. This was a long video. A lot of odds, a lot of numbers, a lot of random stats. But let me know what your thoughts are on the race this week, and I'm excited for it. I know there's been some people that aren't excited for it, but I am. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoy the race this weekend. I'm going to bring you as much content as I can from the track this weekend. Thanks for watching this video. I know it was a long one, so I'm going to shut up now, and have a great rest of your day, morning, or night, wherever you are.